The chamber was not built for a species like his. The air was thin and smelled of ozone and something floral. The light was a soft, unchanging amber that came from no visible source. Min, the appointed representative of humanity, felt small, not just because he was shorter than most of the other delegates, or because their forms were so varied, some insectoid, some floating orbs of gas, some with multiple limbs and eyes. He felt small because the chamber itself, the Galactic Council's seat of power, was a place meant to make you feel that way. It was ancient, older than any human civilization. The weight of history here was a physical pressure. He stood alone at the central podium. Behind him, in a small observation gallery, were the rest of the human delegation. June, Hana, Sue. Their faces were pale, set in tight masks. They had been arguing, pleading, presenting data for weeks. It was over now. The verdict was coming. The presiding Archon, a being of crystalline structure that refracted the amber light into tiny rainbows, spoke. Its voice was not a sound but a vibration directly in the mind, translated by the implant behind Min's ear. The species designated Homo sapiens, the Archon intoned. The mental voice devoid of any emotion has been found by unanimous vote to exhibit irreducible volatility. A cold knot tightened in Min's stomach. The formal term sounded so clinical. It meant they were too chaotic, too emotional, too fast. They had gone from their home planet's atmosphere to their first jump gate in less than 500 years. They had fought each other even as they reached for the stars. They had laughed, wept, and created art alongside their machines. To the Council, who measured time in millennia and valued perfect, static harmony above all, humanity was a spark in a room full of dry tinder. The traits are enumerated, the Archon continued. Rapid, uncontrolled technological acceleration without corresponding societal stabilization. A political landscape characterized by constant, illogical conflict and realignment. A psychological and emotional spectrum prone to extreme and unpredictable variance, from destructive rage to a logical self-sacrifice. This volatility presents a clear and present danger to the stability and safety of all Council members. Min wanted to shout. He wanted to say that their illogical self-sacrifice had saved Azrathi colony ship from a meteor swarm, that their uncontrolled acceleration had found cures for 3 different galactic plagues, that their art and music had brought wonder to species who had forgotten it. But the time for words was past. His own words had been listened to, recorded, and dismissed as further proof of their erratic nature. The sentence is not extermination, the Archon vibrated. The Council is not barbaric. The sentence is permanent. Total banishment. A wave of shock, cold and pure, washed over Min. He heard a sharp intake of breath from Hannah behind him. You will be relocated, via the Grand Network, to the star system catalogued as Perdita. It is a solitary system, beyond the mapped galactic rim. It contains one marginally habitable world. Your population, from your homeworld and all your colonies, will be consolidated there. Your technology will be regulated to pre-FTL levels. Your access to the Jump Gate network will be permanently rescinded. All records of your species, your history, and your location will be archived and sealed. You will live out your existence in peace, and you will, in time, be forgotten. This is the judgment. Forgotten. The word hit Min harder than banishment. To be erased from the story of the galaxy, as if they had never mattered at all. The amber light seemed to dim. Compliance is mandatory. The transfer will commence in 72 of your hours. You will be provided with basic survival materiel. Prepare your people. The vibration ceased. The Archon's crystalline form went dark. All around the vast chamber, the representatives of 1,000 species began to glide and float and click away, not one looking at the human standing alone at the center. The verdict was delivered. The case was closed. The journey back to the human quarters was silent. The quarters felt like a prison already. Jun, the engineer, was the first to speak, his voice rough. "Perbida. I pulled the specs. It's a rock. Thin atmosphere, toxic soil composition, sub-zero temperatures for half its orbit. The habitable zone is a joke." Hana, the agronomist, sat down heavily, her datapad clattering on the table. "We can work with toxic soil. We have samples. We can engineer bacteria. Given a century. But the yield, the caloric output." She trailed off, doing mental calculations that clearly didn't add up to survival. Sue, the historian, was frantically tapping at a portable data core, her fingers a blur. "They said all records. They're going to wipe our public databases from the network. Everything we've learned, everything we've shared. Our history, our literature. It will only exist in what we can carry." Her voice was on the edge of panic. Min looked at them, these brilliant minds who represented the best of humanity's hope. Now they were planning for a slow death on a dead world. He felt a crushing fatigue, but under it, a spark of something else. A deep, stubborn heat. "They think they are giving us a quiet grave," Min said, his voice low but clear. "A place to die off without causing any more trouble." Jun slammed his fist on the table. "So we just go? We just let them herd us onto ships and dump us in the dark? What is the alternative?" Hannah asked, despair creeping in. "Fight? With what? Our single patrol ship against the entire network guard? That would just prove their point about our destructive rage." Min walked to the window, looking out at the glittering stars, each one connected by the invisible threads of the jump gates they would never use again. "No," he said quietly. "We do not fight them. We go. We take their basic survival material. We take every seed, every data chip, every tool they allow. And we take ourselves. Our irreducible volatility." He turned to face them. "Jun, you will find a way to hide every schematic, every theory, every piece of engineering data you can in the cracks of their approved equipment. Make it look like junk, like personal effects. Hana, you will do the same with your biological archives. Not just food crops, everything. Extremophiles, gene sequences, viruses. Sue, you will not just save our history. Save their history. Save the Council's own public records, their science, everything you can access. If we are to be forgotten, we will not be ignorant." The spark in his eyes was catching. Jun straightened, a glint of defiance replacing the anger. Hannah began nodding slowly, her mind already categorizing and prioritizing. Sue clutched her datacore tighter, its job suddenly monumentally important. For the next 72 hours, while their people across the colonies were loaded onto massive, impersonal transport vessels, the team worked in a frenzy. Chun's team stripped non-essential parts from machines, replacing them with data storage wrapped in heat-resistant foil. Hana's biologists spliced crucial genetic data into the DNA of harmless, approved food yeast cultures. Sue and her archivists downloaded terabytes of information into crystalline wafers disguised as religious medallions and children's toys. The final hour came. Min stood with his team at the embarkation ramp of the last human ship. It was a vast, cold vessel designed for cargo, not life. Before them, in the docking bay, glimmered the shimmering blue surface of the jump gate, the technology that had brought them to the stars. It was the last one they would ever see. They boarded. The ship passed through the gate. There was the strange, gut-wrenching lurch of non-space, and then they were in a new, emptier sector of space. A dull red sun burned in the distance. Ahead lay Perdita, a gray-brown sphere wreathed in thin, sickly clouds. It looked exactly like a grave. The ship descended through a turbulent atmosphere, landing with a heavy thud on a rocky plain under a bruised purple sky. The ramps lowered, letting in air that was cold, thin, and carried the scent of rust and ammonia. The last of humanity, wrapped in thermal suits, shuffled out onto the alien regolith, looking up at the unfamiliar constellations. Min, standing at the base of the ramp, turned to face the desolate crowd. He saw fear, despair, and confusion on thousands of faces. He activated his suit's external speaker. His voice, amplified, cut through the howling wind. "They look at this place," he said, gesturing to the barren rocks, the acidic-looking puddles, the ominous sky. "They see an end. They see a perfect, quiet end to the human problem." He paused, letting his words hang. Then he pointed not at the ground, but at the people, at Chun with his hidden schematics, at Hana with her secret seeds, at Sue with her preserved memory of all they were. "We are not a problem. We are a process. They have given us what they think is a grave." Min's voice grew stronger, fueled by that irreducible, volatile spark. "We will prove them wrong. We will prove it is a cradle." The wind on Perdita never stopped. It was a constant, low howl that carried fine dust that got into everything, the seals of the habitat domes, the joints of the farming machinery, the lungs of the people. It was a sound of erasure, trying to scrub them away. The first years were a fight against starvation. The basic survival materiel from the council was just enough to keep them teetering on the edge. The prefabricated habitat domes leaked. The soil, when Hana's team finally managed to test it properly, was not just poor. It was actively hostile. Certain minerals in the red dirt formed a weak acid when mixed with water, poisoning the carefully engineered crops. Hana, who had been pragmatic, became gaunt and fierce. Her lab was a reinforced dome next to the failing hydroponic bays. She worked with the smuggled genetic archives, trying to splice hardiness into wheat and potatoes. Successes were small and fleeting. A batch of tubers would grow, only to wither when the planet's long, dark winter set in. The population, just over 1 million from the combined colonies, began to drop. Not from a single disaster, but from a slow, grinding toll sickness from poor nutrition, accidents in the harsh environment, and a deep, soul-crushing despair they called the Gray. People would simply stop getting up in the morning. Chun, the engineer, fought his own battle. The council's tech lock was severe. Any system with computational power above a certain level would deactivate, its core fused into a useless lump. Their comms could only reach the other side of the planet. They were truly cut off. His hair turned white quickly. He spent his days not on grand theories, but on keeping the water recyclers working and the solar converters from cracking under the dust storms. The grand hidden schematics felt like a cruel joke. He had the knowledge to build a fusion reactor, but he couldn't forge a pipe that wouldn't corrode in 6 months. Sue, the historian, tried to fight the Gray. In the main common dome, she used a low-power projector to show images from the data cores, Earth's oceans, Martian sunsets, the great forests of Proxima Centauri 3. She read poetry and played music. At first, people came. They wept for what was lost. But as the hunger bit deeper, the crowds thinned. The past became a pain, not a comfort. Her work felt more futile than anyone's. What use was history on a world with no future? Min, the former diplomat, was now simply an organizer. He settled disputes over food allotments, organized work details to clear rock for new domes, and sat with the dying. The fiery defiance of his first speech had banked to a grim, stubborn ember. He watched his people shrink and fade, and the council's prediction of a quiet end seemed less like an injustice and more like a simple, brutal fact of the universe. The change started with Chun, but not in the way anyone expected. It wasn't about engines or energy. It was about the wind. The constant, corrosive wind was destroying the fittings on the main atmospheric processor. They needed a specific ceramic alloy to repair it. The formula was in Chun's hidden data, but they lacked the boron to make it. Scouts had surveyed their landing zone thoroughly. There was no boron. "We need to look farther," Chun said, his voice tired. He led a small team on a tracked vehicle, a rattling thing that ran on stored solar charge. Out beyond the bleak hills that ringed their settlement, they drove for a day into a landscape of jagged, black rock formations. It was there, as Chun was taking a mineral scan from a strange, purplish cliff face, that his scanner glitched. Then it died. He cursed, smacking the device. Then he looked closer at the rock. It wasn't rock. It was a crystalline structure, grown in chaotic, sharp angles. It was faintly warm to the touch, even in the perpetual cold. It was also, according to his simple geologist's hammer, incredibly hard. A piece chipped off had a strange internal glow. He brought samples back. To Hannah, it was a curiosity. To Jun, it was a possible structural material. But when he tried to analyze its atomic structure with a working spectrometer, the readings made no sense. The atoms seemed to be in two places at once. They vibrated at a constant frequency, regardless of the temperature around them. Meanwhile, Hannah had her own puzzle. In the most toxic, acidic pools near the settlement, where nothing should have lived, there were thin, film-like organisms. They were her greatest frustration and her only secret hope. Under a microscope, they were beautiful, shifting through colors. Their cellular structure was a mess by any standard biology. They had no DNA as she knew it. Instead, they had complex molecules that seemed to store information in a quantum state. They were not just surviving the poison. They were using it, somehow converting it at a subatomic level. She mentioned it to Jun one evening over a thin, tasteless nutrient broth. He was fiddling with the dead scanner, the purple crystal piece on the table between them. "Your weird slime doesn't follow rules," he said absently. "My weird crystal doesn't either. My scanner didn't break. It was overloaded." "By what?" Sue was there, listening. She had been cross-referencing the smuggled council archives, looking for anything about Perdita. The records were sparse. The system was listed as uninhabitable resource poor. But one ancient, fragmented file, from a survey done thousands of years ago, had a footnote. It mentioned anomalous quantum resonance and non-council precursor artifacts, category, inert. The word hit the room like a physical thing. Precursor. A civilization that existed before the Galactic Council. A civilization that was not of the Council. Jun, Hana, and Sue started working together in a new, small dome they built away from the others. They brought in the purple crystals, the toxic pool organisms, and all the data they had. Jun stopped thinking like an engineer limited by Council rules. He started thinking like a physicist again. Hannah stopped thinking just about making food. She started thinking about how life could be built on entirely different principles. The key came from the simplest of observations. Hannah noticed that the pool organisms thrived near outcrops of the purple crystal. Jun found that when he placed a crystal near a dead energy cell from one of their broken tools, the cell's readings would flicker briefly. Not with electricity, but with a different form of energy. They're linked, Jun said, his eyes wide with an old familiar fire. The crystal and the life. They're not separate. They're part of a system. This planet? It's not natural. It's machine-scarred. The toxicity, the odd geology. It's the residue. It's the footprint of a technology that works by harmonizing matter and space, not by forcing it. He was becoming excited, but his body was old and tired. The decades of struggle had worn him down. He worked day and night, coughing in the dust-filled air. trying to build a theory from the fragments. One night, during a particularly bad storm, June collapsed in the research dome. They carried him to the medical bay, but it was clear. His heart, stressed and tired, was failing. Hana and Sue were by his side. Min came, his face grim. Chun's hand was clutching a simple data chip and a smooth piece of the purple crystal. His breathing was shallow. He looked at Min, then at Hana and Sue. "We were wrong," he whispered, his voice rough. "We thought they limited our engines. We fought to build better engines." He pushed the chip and the crystal into Hana's hand. "They didn't limit our engines. They limited our imagination." He turned his head to look at the ceiling, as if he could see through it to the strange, resonant crystals in the hills. "The key? The key is not to move the ship." He took a painful, ragged breath. "It is to move the space around it." And then he was gone. The wind howled outside, a little louder. In Hana's hand, the crystal felt warm, humming with a silent, ancient song. It was not a song of death, but of a forgotten way to be alive. They were not on a dead world. They were standing in the ruins of a different kind of cathedral, and June had just given them the first note of its hymn. For a long time after Jun died, the purple crystal sat on Hana's work table. It was a monument to him and to a hope that felt too big, too fragile, to touch. The daily fight for survival continued. More people got sick. More lights in the habitat domes went out for good. The gray clung to the settlement like a second. Colder atmosphere. Hana found herself staring at the crystal instead of her failing plant samples. Its internal glow was soft but constant. She remembered what Jun said. The key was not to move the ship, but to move the space around it. She was a biologist, not a physicist, but she understood systems. She understood how a tiny catalyst could change everything. She started with the organisms from the toxic pool. She called them resonance algae. Under the microscope, she saw them exchange energy not through chemistry, but by a synchronized vibration, a hum at the quantum level. They weren't processing the toxins. They were transforming them, harmonizing chaotic molecules into ordered ones. It was a biology of music, not mechanics. She took the crystal to the pool. She placed it in the acidic water near a patch of algae. The reaction was instant and visible. The algae spread faster, their colors brightening. The water around the crystal cleared, the acidity neutralized. The crystal itself seemed to pulse slightly. It was a conversation. The crystal provided a stable, resonant frequency. The algae used it to perform their work. Su, meanwhile, dug through the data Jun had left on the chip. It wasn't just theories. It was equations, models of subspatial geometry. There were also fragments of star maps, pointing to other crystal deposits on Perdita. They weren't random. They were arranged in patterns, like the nodes of a vast, planetary circuit board. Hana and Sue began to work as one mind. Hana learned the language of quantum resonance. Sue learned the principles of harmonic biology. They brought in a young physicist named G, one of the few who still had the energy for curiosity. He had been a student on the last ship from Earth, his brilliance muted by years of fixing water pumps. When Hana showed him Chun's equations in the crystal, his eyes, dull for so long, came alive. "We've been thinking in lines," G whispered, tracing a formula on a dust-covered screen. "But this thinks in folds. It doesn't travel through space. It makes 2 points in space touch." Min approved a small team and precious resources. It was a risk. People were hungry now. Spending energy on a rock and slime project, as some called it, felt like madness. But Min remembered the ember of defiance. He saw the same ember in Hana's tired eyes. He gave them what he could. They used Chun's maps. They found other crystal formations, some deep in caves, some on high mountain peaks. Each one hummed at a different, precise frequency. Using scavenged parts and sheer ingenuity, G built a simple device, a resonator. It could take a tiny electrical charge and translate it into a quantum frequency pulse. They chose a small, remote crystal node, far from the settlement. They connected G's resonator to it. The plan was simple: send a pulse to another node 50 kilometers away, which they had fitted with a simple light beacon. If the space between them folded, the light would turn on instantly. The whole team was there: Hana, Sue, G, and Min, who had come to witness. The landscape was a jagged plain of black rock under Perdita's red sun. The air was thin and cold. G, his hand steady despite the chill, activated the device. It drew power from a solar battery. A low, almost inaudible hum filled the air, vibrating up from the ground through their boots. Nothing happened. G checked connections. The hum continued. Sue watched the scanner, which showed only empty air. Then Hannah looked at the crystal itself. It was glowing brighter, not like a lamp, but from within, as if its heart was waking up. "It's not about the machine," she said, a thought forming. "The machine just knocks. The crystal does the work. We have to ask it. We have to give it a pattern." She pulled out her data pad, connected to the resonator. She didn't input a power command. She input a frequency sequence, a simple harmonic series based on the natural resonance of the owl G. A song, not a shove. G rerouted the signal. The hum changed. It deepened, becoming a chord. The purple light from the crystal flared, not outwards, but inwards, collapsing into a brilliant point. Then, silently, the air in front of the crystal shimmered. It was like looking through heat haze, but the air was cold. Through the shimmer, for just a second, they could see the distant mountain where the other node was. They saw the light beacon on it, and it was on. Then the shimmer vanished. The crystal's glow returned to normal. The hum faded. The beacon light, 50 kilometers away, was a clear, steady pinprick in the gloom. No one spoke. No one cheered. The silence was absolute, broken only by the ever-present wind. They had just broken the oldest law the Council had imposed on them. They had achieved instant travel without a jump gate, without an engine, without a visible energy signature. It was silent, clean, and used the fabric of the universe itself. The meaning of it crashed over them in waves. Min was the first to move. He walked to the crystal and put a hand on it. It was warm, vibrating with potential. "Jun," he said softly. Then he turned to the others. "This changes everything. Not just for us. For everything." The next decade was a blur of quiet revolution. They called it the resonance. They stopped trying to conquer Perdita and started learning to listen to it. G and his growing team of physicists mapped the planetary network. It was a beautiful, intricate web. They learned to harmonize with it, to ask it to fold space. They built their first ship, the Chun's Spark. It was small, shaped not like a dart, but like a teardrop, with a central chamber lined with resonant crystals. It had no engines, only a harmonic driver. On its first test, it disappeared from one point in orbit and appeared at another. There was no flash, no roar. One moment it was there, the next it was here. It was like a thought moving from one part of a mind to another. Hana's work exploded. With the crystals providing stable resonance fields, she could now guide biological processes with impossible precision. She didn't just grow crops. She composed them. She created plants that thrived in the toxic soil, turning the poison into rich, black earth. She designed trees that grew into pre-planned shapes, forming walls and roofs for new living buildings. The gray was chased away by green, growing things. Sue's history became a blueprint. Using the resonant network, they sent silent, invisible probes to other star systems in their galactic backwater. They found more than the Council ever knew. They found dead precursor worlds, not destroyed by war, but transcended. The artifacts there weren't weapons. They were tools for creation, for harmonizing matter and energy. Humanity learned to wake them up. A century after the banishment, the Perdita system was unrecognizable. Where there was gray rock, there were now forests of singing crystal trees. The atmosphere was clear and warm, tuned by vast, continent-sized harmonic arrays. Floating cities, grown from organic crystal hybrids, drifted in the calm skies. The people were different too. They wore simple clothes, their faces calm. Their technology wasn't something they carried. It was something they were part of. They called themselves the Resonance Concord. On the anniversary of the landing, Min, now very old, stood with Hana, Sue, and Ji on a balcony of the central spire. Below them stretched a paradise, born from a wasteland. Above, the stars were clear and bright, no longer bars of a prison. They banished us to die in the dark, Min said, his voice still firm. Hana smiled, holding a small, glowing plant in her hand. But in the dark, she said, we learned to see by a different light. Ji looked up at the stars, not with longing, but with quiet certainty. And now, he said, we know the way home isn't a road they built. It's a song they never learned to hear. 517 years after the last jump gate closed behind humanity, a Galactic Council scout vessel, designated GCV-782, drifted through a sector of space that was, according to all maps, empty. Its commander, Lorvek, was a meticulous being of the Qatari species. He valued order, quiet, and the absolute correctness of the Council archives. This mapping mission was a punishment for a minor bureaucratic error. It was boring, which suited his shame. His ship was a sleek dart of gray metal, powered by a steady hum of fusion engines. Its sensors were tuned to detect the telltale radiation of jump gates, energy weapons, or industrial signatures. It found nothing. Just the quiet dust and the distant, dim red sun labeled Perdita Prime. Approaching the catalog system, his navigation drone chimed. No energy signatures. No COM traffic. No jump gate residuals. Readings match a dead system. Lorvik felt a flicker of satisfaction. The archives were correct. The volatile species was gone, a footnote in history. He was about to order a course change when a junior sensor operator, a young Zrathi, made a soft, confused clicking sound. Commander, there is a visual anomaly near the third planet. Anomaly? Lorvik moved to the view screen. The planet, Perdita, was a gray ball. But around it, visible now as they got closer, was a glittering, intricate web. It was beautiful and impossible. It looked like a necklace of captured stars wrapped around the world. Magnify. The screen resolved. It was not a necklace. It was a Dyson swarm, a collection of billions of energy-capturing platforms orbiting the sun. But these were not the dull, metallic panels of Council design. These were crystalline, geometric, and seemed to be grown, not built. Light flowed through them like water, in soft, pulsing patterns. And between them, floating in serene harmony, were structures. They looked like forests and mountains turned inside out, made of living wood and shimmering crystal, glowing with their own gentle light. There were no engine flares, no obvious signs of industry. Just silent, majestic life. This is not in the archives, Lorvik whispered, a cold dread seeping into his carapace. Scan for technology. For weapons. The sensors swept the system. They returned nonsense. The energy readings were coherent, but did not match any known spectrum. The materials defied atomic analysis. The sheer scale of the swarm indicated power beyond any single Council world, but it was emitted as a soft, ambient hum, not a focused output. It was technology that hid in plain sight. Incoming object. The Zarathi operator clicked, its voice tense. Small. No engine signature. It is just there. On the screen, a vessel had appeared a few kilometers off their bow. It had not jumped in. One moment space was empty, the next the vessel was present. It was smooth and organic in shape, like a seed pod or a river stone, its surface a mixture of warm bronze and deep green. It had no visible weapons, no engines, no ports. A communication request appeared on Lorvik's panel. It was not on any council frequency. It was a simple, open broadcast of light and sound, easy to decode. He accepted. The main viewer changed. It showed a human. Lorvik's respiratory vents clamped shut. The face was human, but utterly changed. The woman had calm, dark eyes and a peaceful expression. Her skin had a faint, mother-of-pearl sheen and subtle, crystalline patterns, like tiny veins of light, traced her temples. She wore simple, elegant robes that seemed woven from living fiber. "Greetings, Galactic Council vessel," she said. Her voice was soft, but it carried a depth that felt ancient. "I am Yoon, a harmonizer of the Resonance Concord. We have observed your approach. You are welcome in our space." Lorvik struggled to process. The language was an archaic form of the common tongue, but spoken with a musical lilt. The human was not hostile. She was not afraid. She was serene. It was more unnerving than any weapon. "I am Commander Lorvik of the Galactic Council," he managed, his voice sounding harsh and grating to his own ears. "Your species is under a decree of banishment. This development is a violation of Council law." Yoon's head tilted slightly, a gesture that might have been curiosity. "The decree was based on a misunderstanding of our nature. We hold no malice for it. The banishment was a gift. It allowed us to find a different path." "A path to this?" Lorvik gestured wildly at the screen, showing the impossible structures. "You have advanced in Forbidden's ways. We have simply learned to listen to a music the Council has long forgotten," Yoon said. "We mean no harm. You may depart in peace, or if you wish, you may send a delegation to the surface. We offer dialogue." Lorvik's mind raced. This was a crisis beyond imagining. A banished species, not only surviving, but thriving with unknown, potentially universe-altering technology. Protocol was clear. Contain, assess, report. He could not allow this to stand. "You will surrender your technology for Council inspection," Lorvik stated, falling back on the authority of his position. "You will submit to a full audit. This is non-negotiable." Yoon's expression did not change, but a faint sadness entered her eyes. "We cannot surrender what is not a possession. The resonance is a relationship, not a tool. And we will not submit to an audit. We are not subjects. Then you leave us no choice." Lorvik cut the channel. He opened a secure tachyonic burst to the Council core. Asterisk Perdita system. Humanity not extinct. Technology unknown. Advanced beyond measure. Request immediate fleet support for containment. Asterisk, the response was swift. A full Council armada, 27 heavy capital ships and over 100 support vessels, was dispatched. They arrived 2 weeks later, materializing from jump gates with flashes of blue energy that seemed garish and violent against the Concorde's soft light. The armada formed a battle sphere around the Perdita system, weapons charging, shields flaring. It was the Council's fist unclenching aboard the Concorde's central world ship, now named Chun's Promise. The Concorde's Defense Council met. It was not a council of generals, but of harmonizers like you, physicists like G's descendants, and growers like Hannah's. The military commander was a man named Kai. He had Hannah's sharp eyes and Chun's practical mind. The Council fleet demands our unconditional surrender. Communications harmonizer said. They are powering weapons. They will attack. Kai watched the tactical display. The Council ships were loud, blazing with energy signatures. The Concorde's few defensive vessels were quiet, small, and scattered. A direct fight, even with their technology, would cause destruction. It was a thing they had moved beyond. We will not fire a shot, Kai said. Activate the Solitude Mantle. Target the lead command ship, the Judgment's Hand. On the bridge of the Judgment's Hand, the Council Admiral watched as a single seed pod-shaped vessel, Kai's ship, detached from the Concorde and moved towards them. It did not raise shields. It did not power weapons. Foolish pride, the Admiral muttered. Target that vessel. Disable it. Before the order could be executed, Kai's ship emitted a pulse of light. Not a laser, but a coherent wave of resonant sound translated into light. It struck the Judgment's Hand. Nothing happened. No explosion. No shield flare. Then, space around the massive command ship began to shimmer. It was the same shimmer from the first experiment, but on a planetary scale. The space around the entire Council Armada warped, folded, and turned inside out. To the crews inside, there was a sudden, gut-lurching sensation of movement. The stars vanished. On the bridge of the Judgment's Hand, the Admiral stared in horror as the stars reappeared. But they were wrong. The constellations were wrong. His navigation officer screamed a reading. They were no longer in the Perdita system. They were in the exact center of the Galactic Council's core systems. They were floating, perfectly intact, right above the Council's homeworld. Every single ship of the Armada was there with them, perfectly arranged in their battlesphere, as if they had never moved. Their weapons were still charged. Their shields were still up. But they were home. On Perdita, Kai's ship pulsed softly once more. The communication channel to the stunned Council fleet opened. His voice was calm, clear, and carried across the light years without delay. You came to our home with the intent to cage us, Kai said. We have simply returned you to yours. The distance between our thoughts is not a distance your weapons can cross. The war you imagine is already over. We do not wish for one. We await your choice to speak, instead of shout. The channel closed. In the core of the galaxy, 27 capital ships hung silently over the seat of galactic power. A perfect, helpless demonstration of a power that made their might look like children waving sticks. They had not been defeated. They had been moved. The message was undeniable. Humanity could not be fought, contained, or controlled. They had changed the rules of reality itself, and they had done it without firing a single shot. The silence that followed was louder than any war. The silence in the Galactic Council's core chamber was not peaceful. It was the silence of a machine that had slammed into a wall. The presiding Archon, the same crystalline being who had banished humanity centuries before, refracted light in jagged, agitated patterns. The Armada's sudden, impossible appearance in the home system was not an attack. It was a statement so profound it had broken their political logic. They had no protocol for an enemy that did not fight, but simply rearranged the universe to make fighting pointless. On the world ship Chun's promise, the Concorde was calm. They monitored the frantic, confused communications of the Council, the fear, the anger, the theories. They did nothing. They simply waited. They had prepared a room, a simple circular space with a floor of living moss and walls that showed a peaceful, flowing image of stars seen from Perdita's surface. In the center was a single chair, grown from intertwined crystal and wood. They did not send a warning. They did not send a demand. One moment, the center of the council chamber was empty. The next, a soft, resonant hum filled the air, and a corridor of shimmering light opened. It was not a jump gate. It was a smooth, circular doorway in space itself. From it stepped a single human. She was young, with the same faint, luminous patterns on her skin as Yoon. Her name was Myra. She was a direct descendant of Minister Min, and a speaker for the Concord. She wore simple gray robes. She carried nothing. She simply walked to the center of the chamber and stood before the stunned council. Presiding Archon, Mira said, her voice clear and carrying without amplification. Members of the Galactic Council, I come on behalf of the Resonance Concord. We have come to talk. The Archon's vibrations were a chaotic storm of colors. You violate this chamber. You violate our laws. We violate nothing, Mira replied, her tone patient, like one speaking to a frightened child. We only use a different door. The door you closed to us was made of fear. We built a new one, made of understanding. A bulky reptilian delegate from a warrior species snarled, rising from its seat. You humiliate us. You move our fleets like toys. This is an act of war. Myra turned her calm gaze to him. Was it an act of war when you moved our entire species to a grave you thought was empty? That was an act of fear. What we did was an act of restraint. We could have moved your ships into your sun. We could have folded space around your worlds until they collapsed. We did not. We chose to show you a truth, not deliver a punishment. The chamber erupted into shouted arguments, clicks, and screeches. Myra waited. She did not fidget. She seemed to be listening to a different, quieter music. When the noise died down, the Archon focused its light on her. What is it you want? You have power. Do you come to demand our surrender? To rule? A soft smile touched Myra's lips. No, we do not wish to rule. We learned on Perdita that true growth does not come from control. It comes from harmony. We come to offer you a choice. She raised her hand. The walls of the chamber seemed to dissolve, replaced by vast, flowing streams of data. It was not Concord data. It was the Council's own data, pulled from their deepest archives. You banished us for irreducible volatility, Mira said. But look at yourselves. The data streams highlighted graphs, medical reports, cultural analyses. Your genetic diversity has been declining for millennia. Your rate of scientific discovery approaches zero. Your art is repetition. Your societies are stagnant. You have perfect harmony, yes, but it is the harmony of a still pond, slowly evaporating under a sun. You are not growing. You are dying. Very, very slowly. The delegates looked at their own hidden truths displayed in the open. The genetic decay they hid. The cultural dead ends they ignored. The fear of anything new that underpinned their entire civilization. Your jump gate technology, Myra continued, it is a crutch. It forces space to obey. It is loud, wasteful, and limits you to a network built by others long gone. It has made you passengers, not explorers. The Archon light dimmed. You speak of things you cannot understand. We understand because we found the alternative, Mira said gently. She changed the display. Now it showed the precursor worlds, not as dead ruins, but as they were places of transcendence. It showed the resonance network, a living, singing web across the galaxy. It showed Perdita, a paradise born from dust. The civilization that came before you did not vanish in war. They evolved. They learned to join the music of the universe. The crystals, the resonance. It is a path, not a weapon, a way forward. She let the images hang in the air. So here is the choice we offer. You can continue as you are. You can keep your gates, your laws, your silent, slow decay. We will not stop you. We will simply step aside. We will exist, and you may ignore us until your light goes out. She took a step forward, her eyes moving across the hundreds of alien faces. Or you can choose a second path. You can let go of your fear. You can learn, not as our subjects, but as our students. And we, as yours. We can teach you the principles of resonance. You can teach us the wisdom of your long history. Together, we can wake the rest of this sleeping network. We can learn what the precursors became. We can build a new alliance, not of control, but of shared growth. The offer hung in the air, so vast and alien that for a long time no one could speak. It was not a demand for submission. It was an invitation to a dance they had forgotten the steps to. On Perdita, the story ended where it began. At the heart of the first settlement, now a garden of singing crystals and eternal blossoms, stood a simple spire. It was made of the first purple crystal Jun ever found, grown now to a great height. At its base, 3 names were carved into the living stone: Jun, Hana, Su, and above them, the words Ming had spoken. Asterisk, asterisk, they have given us a grave. We will prove it is a cradle. Asterisk, asterisk, Kai stood there with Yun, looking up at the spire. The sky above was no longer bruised purple, but a deep, clear blue. Tiny, crystal-winged birds flew in complex, harmonious patterns. They're listening, Yun said softly, meaning the council. They are afraid, but they are listening. Kai nodded. It is a choice they must make for themselves. We cannot make it for them. We can only show them the door. He looked out at the world they had built from nothing. The world born not from conquering a harsh land, but from learning to hear its song. The empire they had created was not one of territory or fleets. It was an empire of possibility, unimaginable to those who had cast them out. He was right. You know, Kai said after a moment. Jun, Hannah, all of them. They banished us to the dark. Yun took his hand. Her skin was warm, humming with the same quiet energy as the world. And in the dark, she said, finishing the old, cherished thought, we learned to see the light they were blind to. Above them, the stars were coming out, not as distant, cold points, but as notes in a silent, beautiful song waiting to be heard.